Harrington's Notes was one of those whirlwind low-budget productions in which we shot over 156 scenes on a 33-day shooting schedule. And that included over 75 locations throughout most of California. The locations ranged from high in the Sierra Nevada wilderness at 12,000 feet to the cities of Orange County. This April of 2020 will mark the 20th anniversary of the completion of Harrington's Notes. In September of 1999, producer William Malkin and myself had first discussed the possibility of making the movie Harrington's Notes. At that time, I had a rough outline of the script and within 3 weeks finished the final shooting script. After 3 months of preparation, we began filming in early March of 2000. We decided to shoot the film on a Super 16mm format and then blow the final print up to a 35mm for release. This seemed the most practical for numerous reasons. First, it would be much easier to get the smaller Super 16mm camera into the remote wilderness areas, and it would also save money. Super 16mm film has no audio track on it, which allows it to capture a larger image than regular 16mm. Its aspect ratio is also closer to a 35mm print, which makes it more suitable for enlargement to a 35mm release print. We had even considered filming on high definition, but in the year 2000 it just didn't seem practical. The technology didn't seem quite there yet. I had just attended an event at Sony Studios in which they were promoting their new high-definition systems. But high definition at that time had numerous drawbacks. You basically needed a huge camera connected by a myriad of thick cables, going into a production van which housed the guts of the system. You also needed an engineer in the van monitoring the equipment. During that period, technology was changing at a rapid pace, and it was apparent to many of us that digital would soon replace film. I myself realized as a director that shooting a low-budget feature on film would soon be obsolete, and this might be my last chance to direct a feature shot on real film. We were lucky to get an experienced cinematographer, Terry Mead, to come on board for my first film. Terry had been around for a while. He actually started as a camera loader on Cecil B. DeMille's The Ten Commandments, went on to work as assistant camera on Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo. There you go, straight for me, just straight up here, look right at me. Okay, I got the slate. Hold it until we get focused. Then second camera on such well-known films as True Grit, Nevada Smith, Elmer Gantry, and The Last Picture Show. Soon after, Terry was promoted to director of photography on John Wayne's The Cowboys, and eventually won an Emmy for his cinematography on the CBS Playhouse production of The Shooter. I am very grateful to Terry for coming out of retirement to be the director of photography on Harrington's Notes. See how long it takes. If I got those, at least I got enough. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. From February 27th to March 10th in 2000, we had scheduled a total of 33 filming days. Harrington's Notes was shot in the dead of the winter and most times under extremely severe weather conditions. Most of the wilderness scenes were shot in either the Sierra Nevadas or the San Bernardino Mountains. In the most extremely remote locations, like this sequence of shots, filmed at 11,000 feet in the Sierra Nevada wilderness, we had to have the equipment, crew, and the cast snow-catted in. A snowmobile was always available in case we had to get someone or something in or out quickly. Later in the San Bernardino Mountains, we encountered the worst of winter conditions. This 100-year-old stone cabin was used as an exterior for the Doc and Christina breakup scene. And as you can plainly see, we're dealing with extreme weather conditions once again. Other scenes like this one at Convict Lake in the Mammoth area were more easily accessible, and we were fortunate to have better weather.
Harrington was found somewhere out there?
Yeah. Right over there. By the
tarn?
By the tarn.
After the reels of film were exposed, they had to be driven from our remote location to the closest airport, and then flown overnight to the lab in Hollywood to be developed and transferred to video to create our dailies. They were then flown back and delivered to our remote location so we could view them the following day. As in most films, you're always watching the dailies 1 or 2 days after they've been shot.
Roll 97, scene 20, Charlie, take 1.
You know, your father, God rest his soul, and I go back a long way.
As a director, you usually spend from 5 a.m. to 7 p.m. filming. Then after a quick dinner and a few more hours of meetings with your production staff, production manager, and sometimes actors in preparation for the next day's filming. Yeah, okay, that's fine. Yeah, no, that's fine. Okay. It's when he sees the TV show, it has to be in the security guard.
No, the TV show one is...
Yeah, I think we're okay. Yeah, by the time you're ready for the next day's shoot, you're lucky if you got in 3 or 4 hours of sleep. In bad weather situations, I would have to have 2 schedules. One which was the planned filming schedule, and another which was plan B in case the weather was so bad you couldn't shoot what you had planned for.
28, scene 67A, take 2.
And action. With little or no room for error on low-budget films, production days can be a grueling process of continuous 18-hour days during a month or longer filming schedule. By late April of 2000, we had finished cutting the negative and all post-production, and had a preview print ready just in time for our world premiere at the Newport Beach International Film Festival. There we had a successful premiere with over 1,600 people attending. Later that year, Harrington's Notes went on to win the Best Feature Award at the Big Bear Lake International Film Festival. I often tell people the story of Harrington's Notes itself was inspired by a John Muir story in which John Muir climbed to the top of Yosemite Falls and found himself stranded up there when a severe summer storm occurred. He explains how he felt he was going to die up there and almost had given up all hope. But then, high atop the waterfall, he sees a tiny flower on the side of the rocky terrain, and he thinks, if that flower can survive up here under these conditions, I can make it out of here, and he does. In Harrington's Notes, Doc McAllister's deceased grandfather, Zachariah McAllister, is a kind of a John Muir figure, a poet who had become famous for his wilderness writings. It is the saga of how Doc McAllister reconnects with his spirituality and his heritage through his grandfather's writings, and awakens his inner self from a life-changing near-death experience in the wilderness. When Doc McAllister finally reads an old manuscript his grandfather had left him, 20 years prior, he learns of the spiritual revelation his grandfather Zach had when lost in the wilderness and close to death.
And soon I, Zachariah McAllister, began to disappear within this wild place. Now the trembling leaf against the wind, the rivers dance across the mighty granite boulders, and the eagle's flight above lofty mountain peaks were all one and the same as I. My eyes could now see what had long been hidden. My ears could now hear what had once been silent. Now I knew what was real and what was was illusion. Here I lost the small man inside and became part of something much greater. Here I was all things wild.
When Zachariah refers to himself as all things wild, he speaks of a oneness with nature and a loss of self-ego, a spiritual revelation which takes him beyond existence on this plane. In this story, the wild is not so much like Conrad's novel Heart of Darkness, that being a savage, hostile environment, as much as it is more of an epiphany, like in Somerset Maugham's Razor's Edge, in which the main character, Larry Darrell, after spending days alone in isolation at the top of the Himalayan mountains, wakes one morning and has an astounding revelation. Larry describes his epiphany as follows, and I quote the novel. "I don't know the words to paint a picture. I can't tell you so as to make you see how grand the sight was that was displayed before me as the day broke in its splendor. Those mountains with their deep jungle, the mist still entangled in the treetops, and the bottomless lake far below me. The sun caught the lake through a cleft in the heights, and it shone like burnished steel. I was ravaged with the beauty of the world. I'd never known such exaltation and such a transcendent joy. I had a strange sensation, a tingling that arose in my feet and traveled up to my head, and I felt as though I were suddenly released from my body, and as pure spirit partook of a loveliness I had never conceived. I had a sense that a knowledge more than human possessed me, and everything that had perplexed me was explained. I was so happy that it was pain, and I struggled to release myself from it, for I felt that if it lasted a moment longer, I should die. And yet it was such rapture that I was ready to die rather than forego it." End quote. And Larry goes on to explain how then he knew he had to come down from the mountain and go into the world and try to make a difference. This was very similar to the epiphany that both Doc McAllister and Zachariah had experienced in the wilderness. It's a life-changing experience that I feel only the wilderness can bring on, an epiphany that can only happen when you are enshrined, alone in the wild for days on end. A primitive connection with our ancient past, giving us a sense of ancient oneness with the universe and our humanness. An experience that sages, prophets, and wise men have talked about since time began. I'm not going to say that Harrington's Notes does not have a message, because it does. It speaks about the value of wilderness and wilderness areas. The message is summed up in Eliza's line when her and Doc are walking at the river.
What has always amazed me is that humans slept by streams like this and lived in similar forests for thousands of years. Wilderness is this link. It's one thing we all have in common. If it's destroyed, how will we ever really know where we came from?